I'm Heidi. Standing in my backyard, surrounded by my family who once took me for granted, I felt a strange sense of calm. My mother, with her cold eyes and a forced smile, had just accused me of being a heartless daughter, of wrongfully withholding family property. The audacity of it all was almost comical. But I knew this was my moment, the moment to finally stand up for myself and show them the truth. Let me take you back a few years. I've always been the responsible one in my family. I run a small bookkeeping business in a quiet town, helping local businesses keep their finances in order. It's not the most glamorous job, but I take pride in it. Numbers are my language, and they don't lie. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, have always been a bit old-fashioned. My father is a kind-hearted man but easily swayed by my mother's strong personality. My mother, on the other hand, is a controlling woman who believes that family should always sacrifice for each other, but only when it suits her. My younger sister, Lily, is 8 years younger than me. She's always been the apple of my parents' eye. When she got engaged to Ryan, a smooth-talking insurance salesman, my mother went into full-blown wedding planning mode. Suddenly, everything was about Lily's big day, and I was expected to chip in, as usual. 5 years ago, my father called me in a panic. They were behind on the mortgage of the family house, and the bank was threatening to foreclose. Without hesitation, I decided to help. But I knew I needed to protect myself. I drew up a promissory note each year, stating that the money I sent was a loan, not a gift. I told my parents it was for tax purposes, and they signed without really reading. To them, it was just another piece of paperwork from their number-crunching daughter. I filed those notes in a hard plastic box on the top shelf of my office closet. It was my way of holding on to a promise, a reminder that my help was not unconditional. 4 years ago, I landed a big contract with a chain of beauty salons. Instead of splurging on a fancy car or a vacation, I bought a small cottage on Lakeview, 45 minutes north of town. It was my little slice of heaven, a place where I could escape from the demands of my family. I put the house in my name only and paid most of it in cash. The first summer, I invited my parents for a week. My mother fell in love with the place and started telling her friends it was the family lake house. I didn't correct her at the time. I thought it didn't matter whose name was on the deed, as long as they were happy. But I soon realized that the story they created was more important to them than the reality. When Lily got engaged, my mother started dropping hints about the lake house. She asked about the cost, the heating, and even if the dock could hold a wheelchair in the future. I answered her questions, but a feeling of unease started to grow inside me. My friend, Sarah, a real estate agent I've known since high school, noticed my worry. She told me to make sure my paperwork was in order. I laughed it off, saying I always kept things organized. Little did I know how important those words would be. The wedding was a beautiful affair, held at a rustic barn. I paid for more than my fair share of the expenses, but I was happy for Lily. During the toasts, my father stood up. He was visibly nervous, holding a piece of paper in his shaking hands. He announced that my parents were giving Lily and Ryan the family house, free and clear. I sat there, stunned. The house I had been paying for, the house I had saved from foreclosure, was being given away without a single thought about me. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there, doing the math in my head. 5 years of payments, gone in an instant. That night, I drove home in silence. I climbed the step stool to the top shelf of my closet and took down the box. I sat on the floor and went through the promissory notes and bank statements. It was a real number, a significant amount of money that I had invested in the family. I felt a mix of grief and anger. They hadn't forgotten the money because they were cruel, they had forgotten because I had made myself so easy to forget. 2 weeks later, my mother called. She said that now that the family house was Lily's, it made sense for them to move into the lake house. She made it sound like a favor to me, as if the house was just a spare room for the family. I told her I needed to think about it. She laughed and said, Think about what, honey? It's family. 3 days later, I drove up to the lake house to prepare for an upcoming storm. To my horror, I found my parents' car and Ryan's SUV in the driveway. My mother was on the porch, measuring the windows for curtains. They were already moving in. I asked them what they were doing. Ryan, with his usual self-confidence, said, "We're getting your folks settled. Family property should go to the family that needs it." I invited them inside and made coffee. My mother started talking about her health and how difficult it would be to find a new apartment. Lily chimed in, saying I didn't use the house much anyway. Ryan repeated his statement about family property. I felt the old urge to say yes, to be the steady one again. But then I remembered the box on the bookshelf. I walked over and took it down. Instead of pulling out the deed right away, I reached for a letter my father had written to me when I started paying the mortgage. I unfolded the letter and placed it in front of my father. His face changed as he read his own words. "Heidi, I know what I'm asking of you. I have no right, but you've always been there for us. I'll pay you back somehow. I'm sorry it's always you." My mother tried to dismiss the letter, saying it was old and my father was just emotional. But I had had enough. I said, "No. The lake house is mine. I've loved you all, and I'll always make sure you're safe, but I'm done pretending." My mother smiled that cold smile again and said it was time to go. I should have been more afraid of that smile. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. It was a police officer. He told me that my parents had filed a complaint against me, accusing me of wrongfully withholding family property and taking financial advantage of them. I was shocked, but I didn't panic. I invited the officer in and showed him the deed to the lake house. I explained that I had purchased it with my own money and that my parents were just summer guests. The officer looked at the documents and said it was a civil matter, not a crime. He even said that based on the evidence, it seemed I was the creditor, not the abuser. After the officer left, I started to shake. I realized that my mother had changed the game, trying to make me the villain. But I was ready. I spent the next few days preparing for the family meeting my mother had planned at the lake house. She had invited my aunts, Martha and Grace, and even the police officer. She thought she was going to expose me, but I was going to expose the truth. I made folders for each person, including the deed, the promissory notes, and the bank statements. I also included a summary page with the total amount I had paid for the family house. The night before the meeting, my father called. His voice was low and full of guilt. He asked me not to bring the letter because my mother didn't know he had written it. I asked him why he was letting her do this. He said, "I'm a coward. It's easier to let you be strong." His words broke my heart, but they also freed me. I told him I wouldn't read the letter, but I was going to tell the truth about the money. When I arrived at the lake house, they were all there, sitting in a semicircle. My mother stood in the center, looking like she owned the place. She started her speech, painting me as a selfish and cold person. I listened quietly. Then I opened my canvas bag and started handing out the folders. I said, "I'm not going to argue. I'm just going to show you what's true." I explained the deed, the mortgage payments, and the promissory notes. The yard went silent. My mother had nothing to say. The police officer read the folder and addressed my mother, saying there was no sign of financial abuse and that I was actually owed money. My mother broke down. She started shouting at me, accusing me of keeping secrets. I looked at her calmly and said, "You gave Lily a house. You gave me a stack of IOUs you forgot you signed." Lily looked at me with a new sense of uncertainty. She asked what it meant for the house and for them. I could have been harsh, but I decided to be kind. I told Ryan, "You were right. Property should go to the family that paid for it." I made them an offer. I would forgive the debt on the family house if they met 3 conditions. First, they would stop treating my property and money as a shared resource. Second, they would plan their retirement honestly, and third, they would give me a real apology. My father was the first to sign and apologize. My mother took longer, but in the end, she signed too. Her apology was stiff, but it was a start. I kept the lake house, and I stopped the mortgage payments on the family house. As I drove home that night, I rolled down the windows and let the cold air in. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a person, not just the steady one in the family. I had finally found my voice, and I was no longer invisible.